So, long story short, what happened was, if y'all are still here, congratulations, because you waited a long time for me to finish that story.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Egoplex Media. I don't know, I'm producer Dave. You can find me on your grinder grid now in the East Bay.
And I'm HK Perrin. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin@port87.social. And you can find me on email at hperrin@port87.com.
I guess you can find me on email at dave@port87.com too, but I won't ever fucking see that shit. So before we get started here, I want to just kind of let everybody know that last week we sort of bid our farewell to Eric Weinstein as a recurring character on here. HK and I had a little off-air discussion about how maybe we shouldn't be covering the same 5 or 6 people over and over and over and over and over again, and we should broaden our horizons a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. So we don't need to say goodbye to Jordy Pete. I have a feeling he'll pop his weird head in constantly around here still. But I feel like we've gotten most of what we're going to get out of Eric Weinstein. And HK, we watched a film he did with David Fuller last week as our main content to bid Eric a fond farewell.
Since we started this show, when did we start the show? Like 2018? Something
like that.
Since we started this show, the intellectual dark web has gone through a lot of changes.
Mostly fizzled out.
So, yeah, it would make sense for us to change as well, for us to evolve with them.
Or away from that main, like, basically, if people are doing sort of like guru or like online cult leader behavior, they're like in our crosshairs now. They don't have to have stood in front of the fucking plant.
Yeah. Basically anyone who's like who claims to be a public intellectual or who is heralded as a public intellectual, but is actually just full of shit.
Right. And maybe once in a while we may come across somebody we think is full of shit and they're not, as we broaden the scope, but that's highly unlikely. So since we bid a farewell to Eric last week, I wouldn't want his brother to get jealous.
A single farewell, just the one.
So I wouldn't want his brother to get jealous. And so we're going to go ahead and give a little swan song to Bret and Heather this week. I have no idea what the shit they talked about on their podcast. But we are going to go ahead and we're going to watch it. We'll get to as much of it as we can during the main show, but everybody, this week's show will be a freebie on Patreon because we're going to watch the whole thing. So that's patreon.com/Echoplex. If you're listening to the pod on this, go ahead and head on over there. It will already be up because the patron show goes up early. And while you're there thinking about giving us some money, or even better, go to eplex.store and give us that same money. You'll get the same thing that you would on Patreon, except you're doing it through Fourth Wall, and Fourth Wall is cool as shit. You can buy some fucking merch there too, like this tinfoil hat I have.
Fourth Wall does webhooks, and they're awesome.
Oh yeah, and if you buy something there, it'll automatically tweet on my behalf and put something in the Discord. So you put a funny name there. Maybe put a name.
You know
there.
what you could do is you could make Dave say all sorts of things by putting whatever you want in the shipping name.
That is correct.
Whatever you put in there, Dave will tweet out.
All of a sudden I'm like, I can't log into my Discord. Why is my server gone? Anyway, without any further ado, this would be episode, I don't know, we'll figure it out. I think 160 fucking something of the Dark Horse podcast. I'm sorry. Like they thank you to Winter Garden for allowing us the rights for this excellent music. The music is just like the waiting screen on Mario Kart.
Hey folks, welcome to the Dark Horse Podcast live stream 187.
Why are we so slow today?
What?
186.
186.
Yeah.
186.
186.
186.
All right. Yes, it is the 186th live stream. I'm Dr. Bret Weinstein. This is Dr. Heather
We're
Hine.
on super speed.
Okay. All right. I'm apparently...
You know, I really do miss the all wood room.
I do too. I also liked the stuff behind them. Now they just have like a, I don't know, they probably have some fucking problematic, culturally appropriating reason for this thing behind them, right?
Yep.
Like they have like a shitty ceramic zebra on their desk. It's like not even like, it looks like it's made of chalk. This motif is not great.
The only thing good in that is the dog.
Possibly
All dogs are good boys.
I think that might be in Herman Miller chairs too.
They are. Yep. That's the one with like literally every single adjustment a chair could possibly have.
And yet these two still look incredibly uncomfortable. Or maybe it's just that they're making me uncomfortable. I don't know. So everybody, by the way, this episode is going to be heavy on the ad hominem attack, but maybe not so much on the fallacy.
Speed has been set on the setting in which it makes large jumps rather than small jumps. We're going to dial this in over the next few minutes.
There we
Don't worry
go.
too much about it.
All right.
But anyway,
It is 186.
it is 186.
I believe, unless I've got that wrong.
It's
but
186 in the
let's-
shade.
let's
You know what would have been great if the last episode we ever played of them would have been 187? Because like
What's that?
187 on a motherfucking cop.
on that question, right? You
Fair
and
enough.
Dr.
I don't know what that
Bret
means.
Weinstein and Dr. Heather
Look up
Hine.
187.
Here we are with the live stream Evolutionary Lens of the Dark Horse Podcast. We've been coming at you with this for a good long time now.
Yes.
Over 3 years.
It has been
Over 3 years.
3 years.
And we're just
Oh,
going to keep
okay.
on going. So you can join our watch party at Locals right now, or you can join in what would be a chat elsewhere. But that is the place, the only place that the chat is happening.
And they make you pay to chat. Locals is not free. They make you pay to chat.
That's like the subscriber only chat on Twitch.
Yeah. Except you can't even see it. I have a feeling they were getting a lot of maybe trolls because I feel like they're waning a bit in popularity. So I feel like they were maybe getting some trolls.
And we encourage you to join our Locals for both that reason and because the private Q&A that we've been doing at my Patreon for almost 3 years, or actually over 3 years now, we're going to be moving to our Locals as of this month. So that'll be on the last Sunday of the month.
Who has any cues they want aid by
very
these
much encourage you to
people?
Go there and you'll
Oh, they probably get a ton.
also
Why?
be able to get to our Discord server there from our Locals. So we're going to talk about all the other places that you can find us and such at the end. But for now, we'll also do a Q&A, live Q&A after this episode. And the one remaining piece of business that we want to talk about before we launch into content is, of course, our sponsors, for whom we are very grateful, whom we take seriously and vet make this from the sweet world's basketball experience.
Nope.
They have the weirdest sponsor readings of literally anyone.
Drinks, just it's
quite long.
Again, feel like
And it's just like printed out on a page, and she's reading it off the page.
America make it simple.
Like I bet you, like they sent her some copy, and she was like, "Okay, I'll just read this on the podcast."
It's still going, and I'm fast forwarding through it.
Water including.
By the time this is over, you're just like, whatever, just shut up. I'll buy the fucking thing.
My issue of
County Highway, the first issue, if I'm not mistaken.
This is awesome. This piece I was reading, Son of Joshua Tree. I was actually just looking back at the lead because I finished this yesterday. Son of Joshua Tree, Coachella babies overrun desert paradise, Airbnb schemers displace weirdos and freaks, mysterious energies remain. It's like 4 different sets of headlines. For those of you unaware, County Highway is a new publication, the brainchild of a number of people, including but not limited to David Samuels and Walter Kern. They have at the top America's only newspaper, which is obviously a bit tongue-in-cheek. But
is that a joke, Heather?
Responding to the need for.
Oh my God! It's like The Onion, but like not funny
and enjoyable.
Like worse than Babylon.
Is it like okay, so it's like a conservative Onion.
I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along. I've never heard of this thing.
Okay,
but it says America's only newspaper. It's it's probably an unfunny satire publication.
Both journalism and just
or maybe it's an extreme right-wing publication.
This County Highway is not online. I mean, they have a website and you can go and subscribe online, and then you will get it to your mailbox. And they've got in this issue a piece by RFK Jr. on falcons.
And
they've got
on falcons.
Camps,
oh, that's right. He does falconry because he's every man,
including call him by me. But that is not the reason to subscribe. You can also find it across the country in a number of bookstores, feed stores, record stores.
I don't understand why anyone would want a newspaper in the mail. Because I've done that before for like 2 weeks, and it's like you get the newspaper 2 days after it's published.
Yeah, I don't think this is like a breaking news stuff. I think this is like they just mentioned that RFK Jr. wrote a thing about it in falconry, about falconry HK.
Okay, so this is like a magazine, but printed on a newspaper.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Lots of places
that, makes sense.
That such publications, magazines and such might be sold. You will find this. And once you pick up a copy, you'll probably want to subscribe.
Yeah, super cool. And, America's only newspaper where you don't have to put news in scare quotes.
That's right.
Actual news.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's probably like Barry Weiss's fake university.
Wheat crop disaster, worst since 1917. Stressed wheat produces only a single grain. It's just
if it's delivered in the mail, it's not news.
I recommend this as
At best, it's old.
At all. But
friends of the show, and we are enthusiastic about this amazing and very unique project.
Indeed. All right. Actually, before...
Are they going to have technical problems with their son showing her screen? I hope they do. That's my favorite part.
Of the episode, about which you have many things. I want to consider...
Headlining for Animal Pen, says someone in the chat. This absorbs the most hamster piss of any paper you could get.
Your observation in that last ad, that cinnamon is a bark.
We'll even shred it for you before we send it.
And I think we've mentioned this on the show before, that we were, 15 years ago probably, in an IKEA in their seconds room, because IKEA wasn't cheap enough. We had to go to their seconds room. And there's actually some interesting stuff to be found in IKEA's seconds room, as it turns out, including, as it turns out, a solid wood bench that we still have in our entry today.
I'm not familiar with the term seconds room. Is that like the sold as is stuff?
It's like the clearance. Maybe returns, because you can't sell in most states have laws that you can't sell a return as new even if it hasn't been opened.
Okay, yeah, so that's their Like they have a section at the registers or near the registers that's like a sold as is.
Sure. I don't know exactly what it, but it's like their clearance, I'm sure.
Okay.
We could actually get bogged down in the exact nature of how IKEA puts their stuff on the floor in there if you'd like, HK. I'm sure that I would love that. I would be overjoyed to do that.
I could talk for 30 minutes on that easily.
Oh, the connection seems to be a little wonky. What's going on?
Just a tiny bit of mooring, but it was 100% mango wood. Because mango is not just a fruit. Of course, mango is a species of plant.
Oh, thanks, Heather. Mango is a kind of tree. Fucking genius shit. Coming in hot.
As opposed to the other fruits that are just a fruit, not a species of plant.
Right, the apple, it just fucking materializes.
You have to make them, right? You piece together an apple.
As its growth habit. It's a tree form. And of course, therefore, lots of trees wouldn't make good furniture, but it turns out that mango wood does. And when we were interested in it, but in the second part of IKEA, it's not really clear. It's not the same sort of thing that you do to go and check out. We had to find someone who worked at IKEA to get him to, get it to us. And he objected mightily to our characterization of a piece of furniture as being made of mango.
Mango, right.
Yeah, he said
15 years ago, we sure showed that guy at IKEA.
I mean, you'd say it's made of mango wood, right?
I mean, I didn't know you could fit a whole ass IKEA into a hipster coffee shop, but here we are.
Well, I guess, no, yeah, you could say like something's made of apple, I guess, but I don't know. I feel like you would say like apple wood instead of that.
We don't do that here. Mango is a fruit. We don't make furniture out of fruit. And
he claimed to have tasted the bench and it didn't taste remotely of mango.
No, he did not. But the rest of the story is actually true.
Oh, no, it's not.
I mean, yeah, you'd normally say apple wood.
Right. I would love to have this conversation
wood,
too, if you can't tell. I just don't think this happened.
Oh, I totally think this happened.
You think?
I think they were being super weird about it. He goes like, "Oh, like mango wood," and they go, "No, it's made out of mango." He's like, "No, it's made out of the wood."
Right.
Yep.
Mango
and
wood.
It was both surprising and not surprising to hear from someone who had just never been in the place where mangoes are grown, that they have internalized what they occasionally find in their market as if delivered by gods, right?
No, they know that they're like, hey, where do you think a mango comes from? And people are like, well, the grocery store. You're like, no, before that. They're like, oh, a tree, right? Like,
I mean, I guess maybe like one person didn't know that and they managed to find that person.
Right, like this fruit just comes down from the sky and shows up in like plastic clamshell cases, right?
Where do they? They buy individual fruit in plastic clamshell cases. They just told on themselves.
And that's all.
They buy it pre-sliced.
Else known as mango out there, and so that story reminded me. I was reminded of that when you said that cinnamon was a bark. When I said it's not a fungus because that's a sort of a list of mostly fungus, and then you get to cinnamon. The part of cinnamon that is used in mud water is the bark of the cinnamon tree. But
yes.
Cinnamon isn't a bark. Cinnamon, the product, is a bark. Cinnamon itself is a...
see it until the very end. You caught me. You caught me. I was speaking in shorthand, and I was doing that.
This is just semantics, though. Most people, when they say cinnamon, they mean cinnamon, the product.
Yes, and when they say a mango, they mean the fruit. Like, we understand all this. I'm just thinking, like, are they just practicing for the day that they eventually get invited to a dinner party again?
And then someone's going to be like, okay, so I need like 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And they're like, I can't do that because vanilla is a plant.
Yeah, don't let them help you cook.
Calibrating the speed at which I talk in regular hand. Why I'm talking with my hands, I don't know. But,
because that's how people talk.
Yes, Yep. Well, I'm glad I'm glad we covered that topic-ish.
Yeah, just it's just one of the sort of the ways that biologists, at least organismal biologists such as ourselves, wander around the world, seeing how people categorize things as the bit that humans use.
Yeah.
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with like being a biologist. That's just being insufferable,
Right.
is what that is.
That's the reason that you have to practice for your next cocktail party. They're like, this is vodka. They're like, have you ever seen a vodka plant? They're like, get out.
You don't do that. You just you said it that way in line in an ad read. Following my interruption, so I was already throwing you, right? But I'm reminded that for the most part, we tend to see the whole organisms in things, and it makes, for instance, shopping at a grocery store rather a longer process because you're considering, what is this? What was the original plant? What does it make sense? For instance,
No, you're fucking not. Excuse me, no. You are not. You're not looking at a box of apples going, let me think about the tree that these apples were harvested. Like, fuck off. No one does that. Not even you.
Right? Like, I bet they get like HelloFresh. They don't even go to the store. And if they do go to the store, they'll buy like a pear in its own plastic fucking clamshell. Just because they don't want any of the common people to have fucking touched it.
buying apples in August. Mostly not. Those are going to be pretty old apples. Those are going to be old apples or apples from a far remove. Whereas stone fruits and cherries and berries, yeah, this is the moment. This is the moment. So thinking about what the organism is and where it grows and when it grows and how it was grown is all part of the sort of organismal biology approach to the world.
It results in lots of practical advice. Like if you were to encounter a cinnamon tree and feel inclined to eat directly from it.
So literally no one else thinks about which fruits are in season. No one else, just biologists. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Right. I don't ever think, well, I'm sure the strawberries are on sale, but it's January. So how far did they travel to get here, and will they be delicious? Well, the answer is probably quite far and probably not. Probably going to go bad.
Like, I swear to God, these people are like competing to be the most insufferable people in the entire world.
They're competing with Bret's brother.
Yeah.
The bark.
But they're all trying to catch up to Steven Pinker.
Yeah, actually. So where is cinnamon native? I think it's going to be tropical Asia. I don't actually know. I don't know. And I don't think I feel confident that we've never seen it. I've never seen it in the wild. Whereas we have seen nutmeg trees, yep. Right? And we have and in forests, and not just in human produced farms for.
We have somebody in chat who's a professional biologist. Well, someone in chat, these people haven't been biologists or biology professors for quite some time. They're talk show hosts, and that's a perfectly fine thing to be. I am a talk show host. I just don't pretend to be a fucking political scientist. Like, but what I'm doing is a little closer than what they're doing, because they're just like quibbling about the fucking bark of a cinnamon tree.
They're not even quibbling about it. They're just saying, like, when everyone else shops, they only think about like the thing that's right in front of them. When I shop, I think about the entire organism that it came from. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to think about what organism a Pop-Tart came from.
Right. Like I am at the store to get what I need, stay out of the way of the other shoppers so they can get what they need, go to the checkout, be nice to the person at the checkout, put my stuff in my backpack, and then go put the stuff in the fridge or the cupboard and then use it. That's what I go shopping for. It's not like an intellectual pursuit. Usually I'm shopping for energy drinks and vodka, and I know exactly where those are. I just moved, but all three grocery stores nearby, I know exactly where the vodka and the energy drinks are.
But do you ever think about the Rockstar tree that was squeezed to make that energy drink?
There is nothing from a tree in my rock star. It all comes from like an unlicensed nuclear accelerator somewhere. It's like all waste.
Okay, but Red Bull actually does come from Red Bulls, right?
Right. Oh yeah. That obvious.
Okay.
That's why I don't drink
Gone
it.
into nutmeg and
I would end up
moonside
thinking
and
about it
various
too
other
much.
Things that people will have heard of, but when you're wandering around neotropical rainforest, you see these trees if you know what you're looking for. I don't think I've ever seen a cinnamon tree. Therefore, I don't have any idea what the fruits look like. Therefore, I don't know
The cinnamon tree may not have a fruit. You just said that it comes from a bark. The tree may not fruit. What does the fruit of a pine tree look like? It's pine cones.
to eat the fruits.
I don't think a pine cone is a
Birds,
fruit.
but I don't know, and I don't know if it's bird distributed. It's probably not very good for humans, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, if it's even a fruiting tree, which is very
Even Bret was like, come on, it might not even be a fruiting tree. If it is a fruiting tree, I bet the fruit is fucking nasty. Otherwise, we would eat it.
but not certain, not dead certain.
I mean, we eat anise,
I think it's a
and anise is nasty.
dicot, which is going to make it fruiting.
We're gonna know soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway,
They've been talking for almost 20 minutes.
you were hoping to talk
They would have been kicked off the stage at Toastmasters already.
about some things.
Well, keep in mind, they had a 15-minute
I wanna lead
ad.
us through a series
Oh, that's right.
connections that proceed from something that we talked about, in fact, last week. It wasn't the first time we discussed this, but last week we talked about a clip from a interview that GadSad did with Paul Offit. And in that clip, Paul Offit suggested that the myocarditis and pericarditis that is observed after mRNA vaccinations for COVID might be the result of the fact that the spike protein mimics the chemical shape, effectively, of
But you already talked about the clip last week. What the fuck are you doing?
actin protein in heart cells, and that therefore the unfortunate
Somebody in
choice of
chat's
spike
like,
protein
they've certainly fallen far because they're pretending GadSat is a real person.
might result in the immune system attacking.
I mean, whatever problem it would create would be the same problem that was caused by the virus, right?
I
Because
don't
the
know.
virus also has those spike proteins.
That I don't know.
Like,
What
we
I
didn't
said was
just
that this
put
looked
spike proteins in your body for no reason. Like, we put them in your body because they're the unharmful part of the virus.
like a limited hangout, because what it did by blaming the spike protein as the root cause was liberate us to start loading other proteins onto the mRNA platform for other diseases, or potentially other proteins even for COVID. And so my claim was that he was missing something that he should know. And in fact,
That's actually kind of sad that Paul Offit was like a vaccine advocate as far as I knew. And now I guess he's gone heterodox. That really sucks.
choosing to blame the spike protein because what it did is limits the bad press surrounding the destruction of hearts by these vaccines to the choice of antigen, which can easily be fixed the next time,
It effectively exonerates the mRNA platform,
if true.
if true.
If true.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously. That's
So that's a hypothesis, and what I pointed out was
Well, why don't you do some work and test the hypothesis? Oh, no. Then you'd have to subject yourself to peer review, and then you'd be like, oh, I just read the peer review, and
The focus on ridicule.
the hypothesis that you and I have talked about quite a number of times here on Dark Horse. I went back and, with the help of our Clips guy, David, found the original place where I had presented the hypothesis to begin with, and it was February of 22. In February of 22, I laid out an hypothesis for the damage to hearts. Remember, myocarditis means inflammation. Inflammation is a symptom of heart damage. And We have since seen quite a number of pieces of evidence about things related to this damage. But anyway, it's become a central focus because it is the most obvious form of damage that results from these vaccines. And so there's been a lot of battling back and forth over what it does and doesn't mean, how it compares to COVID itself, etc. But the hypothesis...
Oh, back and forth between you and people you largely agree with? Like, what do you mean back and forth on Substack? See, I don't like their use of the word hypothesis here because they're doing, as Alex from Q Origin said, they're doing academic window dressing. When he says hypothesis, if I think of like somebody's using that in like a proper way, that's part of a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generally part of it. You don't just say, "Oh, I have a hypothesis," and just leave it there. No, then
you get a dangling hypothesis.
Yeah, it's like a dangling participle, except I don't know what a participle is. And please don't tell me, I don't care. But like when someone says hypothesis, I usually think of it in like a clinical setting or in like a setting where they're going to do a study. Otherwise, like people are just like, "Oh, I have a theory," and they mean it like colloquially, like when you're talking to your friend, like, "Oh, I have a theory on this," and you're not like, "Oh, is it a blah blah blah?" Are you published? You're just like, "Oh, Dave's just fucking saying things." I mean, like a guess, right? But they use hypothesis.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hypothesis without an experiment is just a guess.
Yeah, but they wouldn't just. It's so weird. It's so crazy. I mean, I guess it's better than using the word theory, but also maybe it isn't, because if you're just kind of spitballing and you say theory, everybody kind of knows what you mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you use the word hypothesis, you sort of clinicalize what you're saying, and it makes it sound like you're doing a science.
You sound like you're about to do an experiment. But if you have no intention of doing the experiment, then you don't really have a hypothesis. Like,
right. And maybe not
you
an
might
experiment.
technically have a hypothesis, but you're not doing science.
Right. Or maybe not an experiment. You might do a survey, right? If you're doing something in the social sciences, you can't necessarily do an experiment on everything. So you do surveys and you gather you would gather some data or get some information to see what's going on with the hypothesis you have. In this case, they're just like, well, here's something I fucking came up with in the middle of the night, and I'm going to put it on my show and act like I'm doing a science.
Yeah, I would say if you have no intention to experiment, to like actually figure out whether what you think is true, you should just say, I have a guess.
Or here's what I think could be going on.
Yeah.
That I first deployed in February of 22.
He deployed a hypothesis, HK. It's like if I deployed a tank.
He used a hypothesis deployment procedure, an HDP.
That we revisited in our last...
Otherwise known as a tweet.
And compares, it is a distinct mechanism from the one...
Somebody in chat called that a swag. That's a scientific wild-ass guess.
It lays out, suggests that the vaccines, by their very nature, will result in the cells that translate the mRNAs into proteins. I don't know why. Proteins. No.
He was thinking of poutine.
Proteins. Any cell that translates these mRNA messages into proteins is going to be targeted by the immune system, which will incorrectly regard them as virally infected because they are putting out the signature of a virally infected cell. The signature of a virally infected cell being that it has molecules that look like your own molecules and it has molecules that look foreign. Any cell that gives that signal is suggesting to the immune system that it is virally infected, and destroying it is, while bad, the best thing to do, because that cell, if it is virally infected, is not going to become uninfected.
Yeah, this sounds like he's saying this with a, he's left hypothesis, right? He's saying this is true.
Yes, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the cells that produce the spike protein...
Oh, I'm not going to correct you if you're wrong. I'm not going to even pretend I know.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure that the cells that produce the spike protein in your body after you get an mRNA vaccine don't continue to produce the spike protein indefinitely.
This, again, you're doing a swag.
Well, I'm not saying it's a hypothesis. I'm saying that's my understanding of the mRNA vaccine.
Sure. His email is hperrin at port87.com, not echo at echoplexmedia.com.
It's making the best of a bad situation so far as the immune system can see.
Right. Now, a paper emerged this week, and I don't know whether this is just a simple coincidence or whether Offit was trying to seed the world with the idea that the problem was the spike protein molecular structure looking like heart muscle proteins, or not. It could be just a coincidence, or it could be mere coincidence, or it could be meaningful. Maybe he was trying to get ahead of this paper that was going to emerge in Science Immunology, which is a high-profile, top-tier journal. And so, Zach, do you want to show the paper?
You want to bring up just the title of the paper so that we can grossly misrepresent it and not even read the abstract?
I've got it on my screen too if you want to show that.
Okay, so here we have the paper.
Oh, geez.
It's
like
the title
zooming in to
is
get even less of the article.
With aberrant cytotoxic lymphocytes and profibric myeloid response in SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccine-associated myocarditis.
Okay, is there a difference between a research article and like a published paper published for peer review? Because this says research article. I'm asking the question like of the universe, not asking you if you have the answer. I'm wondering, does that mean something different than a paper? Than like a paper that's been put somewhere for peer review?
And what this paper does is it looks at the pathology in people who are experiencing.
Hey, we're actually getting the abstract
following mRNA vaccination for COVID, and it analyzes.
He didn't read the first word. The first word said rare. He just left the word out.
Cellular and molecular environment in which the myocarditis is happening. It analyzes the various components in order to test competing hypotheses about what might be causing this pathology. And so what I'm proposing to do is to go through, I think we should go, there's a little paragraph that has been inserted that describes the work, and then there's the abstract of the work, which summarizes the work. The authors themselves summarize the work.
He's like, what I'm going to do is take 3 or 4 random sentences from this and string them together as if they're a paragraph, and then give you a skewed view of what this article says.
So Science Immunology is a peer-reviewed journal. So I would guess that this article being up on their website means that it's been peer-reviewed and published in the journal.
The abstract as a standard scientific process.
I don't have in the official PDF of the paper. I don't have the lay abstract.
The lay abstract, but I think we should go through the real abstract. And I will say, I did take a course in immunobiology many years ago. I speak immunobiology for this reason, but I'm not fluent in it, and I'm not.
So he took a course in immunobiology, and he speaks immunobiology, but is not fluent in it. Do you know how many things I took a fucking course in?
Not current in it. This is, what I learned in immunobiology has stood the test of time. It's high quality stuff, and among the best things I did as an undergraduate was taking this course. It has paid back dividends each and every year since. I learned a tremendous amount. But anyway, I'm going to use what I understand to try to translate as much of this abstract as possible, and you will see the relevance to this question raised by Offit and his proposal, and my proposal from February of 22, which is now finally getting some traction. Okay, the abstract says, and you will help me if I screw it up because there are a lot of complex technical terms here. Rare immune-mediated cardiac tissue inflammation can occur after vaccination, including after SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccines. Now, they have to say rare because you have to kowtow to the appropriate gods on this. You can't possibly...
Or...
Not because it is rare.
or because it is a a descriptive term that is applicable in this case.
Yeah.
You also like it says
anything
it
to make
can't.
him look right?
They're also using the word can because they can't just say does.
Possibly be caught in a major journal like this admitting that the injuries from these vaccines are actually shockingly common.
Yeah, most of the abs-
No, they're not admitting that. They
Okay.
just said rare.
So he prefaced this with saying, I have the ability to read scientific journals and you don't. So I'm going to use my big brain to translate this so that your small brain can understand it. And then immediately after the first sentence, he's like, now look, I know that you're reading these words, but they don't actually mean these words. They mean the opposite of these words.
I am
The
not.
first fucking sentence.
The first word.
Yeah, true.
abstracts we have seen that have in any way found damage associated with these vaccines have ended with a sentence that is something to the effect of, but despite all of this, it is still necessary that everyone go out and get vaccinated right away. Right. So this does not have that, but it begins with rare.
It has to say that. And
Somewhere.
then somewhere you hear an echo across the academy where everyone goes, Amen. Right? Okay. However, the underlying immune, cellular, and molecular mechanisms.
So wait, hold on for 1 second, because we are talking about a virus that has killed multiple millions of people. This vaccine protects you against that virus. And they're saying that no, because sometimes you might have heart problems if you take this vaccine.
Well, not for nothing. Like, you don't always become symptomatic of myocarditis. Sometimes it's just temporary and you don't even notice it.
Yeah. So they're saying, no, instead of taking the vaccine, you should just die. Or at least have like a 1 in 200 chance of dying.
Here, we investigated a cohort of patients who developed myocarditis and or pericarditis. And I should say, myocarditis is inflammation of the heart itself. Pericarditis is inflammation of the pericardium, which is the sac in which the heart sits. So these are both heart-associated inflammation, but in a slightly different tissue.
It'd be 1 in 2,000. 1 in 2,000 chance
With
of dying.
elevated troponin. You've heard us mention troponin recently in the study that we covered that John Campbell had covered, where instead of...
So he's not really reading the abstract and translating it to you in any sort of meaningful way. He's reading the abstract and talking about himself.
People to walk in with some sort of a pathology that caused them to seek medical help. They simply assessed troponin levels in people who had been vaccinated and found them in something like 1 in 35 people, indicating an awful lot of damage that's subclinical, that doesn't cause you to seek attention from a doctor, but is enough that it's measurable in your blood.
But I'm sure it'll be fine.
It'll be just fine, of course. Amen.
So it doesn't, he's just injecting stuff that it does not say in this abstract.
Yep.
Not only is he mad at the first word, but he's also, he's just, the abstract is there so that someone like me or you can actually kind of read it. And we're not going to understand all of it, but a layperson with a decent vocabulary can, even if you don't know what some of the stuff means, you can use context to get the gist. So he's basically telling his audience that they're stupid.
Well, he's telling them that you can't trust your own eyes. Let me tell you what to believe instead of believing what you read in a scientific journal.
B-type natriuretic peptide and C-reactive protein levels, as well as cardiac imaging abnormalities shortly after SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccination. So these are just markers that they're using. Contrary to early hypotheses, patients did not demonstrate features of hypersensitivity myocarditis, nor did they have exaggerated SARS-CoV-2 specific neutralizing antibody responses consistent with hyperimmune humoral mechanisms.
Specific or neutralizing antibody responses.
So this is going to take a little unpacking, but what they're saying is people have suggested that there might be some folks who, I think this is what they're saying. some folks may have sensitivities which make them prone to myocarditis, and they may be just simply triggered by this vaccine. They don't see evidence of that.
That's not what that said at all. That said, contrary to these patients did not demonstrate features of that just means that these patients are not demonstrating features of myocarditis caused by hypersensitivity. It didn't say hypersensitivity to the vaccine. They would say that. And it also says exaggerated SARS-CoV-2 specific, and this means probably from having had COVID. Like he's just, I mean, I'm not incredibly scientifically literate, but he's lying. He's straight up lying.
Say that there's no evidence with hyperimmune humoral mechanisms. Now, what they're talking about here, humoral mechanisms are not entirely limited to, but they are primarily talking about antibodies of the kind that you have heard overly focused upon with discussions of these COVID vaccines. What they're saying is we do not see an overabundance of SARS-CoV.
Oh, over under that he's even going to finish the abstract? What do you think?
50-50.
To antibodies causing the heart to be inflamed. Okay, so they are ruling out these proposals. We additionally found no evidence of cardiac.
No, we have no evidence is not ruling out. This is like simple logic. We have no evidence. You don't rule things out because you haven't found evidence of them. You just say that we didn't find evidence of these things.
Targeted antibodies. Oops.
Autoantibodies.
This is what Paul Offit was suggesting, right? That autoimmune antibodies created because the spike protein mimicked what he said was the heavy chain of the actin molecule in the hearts would result in those antibodies being findable. They didn't find them. Instead, unbiased systematic immune serum profiling revealed elevations in circulating interleukins of a number of different kinds, chemokines of a number of different kinds, and matrix metalloproteases.
I don't know the significance of those second two classes of molecules.
These are enzymes. I don't know much about it. So they're saying they didn't find them. Subsequent deep immune profiling using single cell RNA repertoire sequencing of peripheral blood.
Quick aside here. Before he read this, he prefaced it with, well, I've got all the chops to read this and explain it to you. And several times while he's been reading, he said, well, I don't exactly know what that means. So it sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about.
And that's fine, actually, except that he said that he does.
Yeah. And like, yeah, I don't know what this means. I don't know what a metalloprotease is. But I'm not saying I can read this and interpret it for you. I can't. And neither can he.
Mononuclear cells during acute disease revealed expansion of activated CXCR3 cytotoxic T cells and NK cells. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. And I realize that was not a sentence to make you think anything important had happened. But what they're saying...
Well, no. I mean, many people would read that sentence and say, I have no idea what's going on here. Maybe there's something important.
Is Heather negging Bret right now, being like, you don't know what you're talking about?
But I can't interpret it.
So
NK.
So NK is natural killer. Cytotoxic T cells. These are T cells that kill your own cells.
Also sort of colloquially called killer T cells.
Yep. Both phenotypically resembling cytokine-driven killer cells. Now, what they're saying is inflammation, and actually people who listen to the Umberto Maduri Paul Merrick podcast, which I highly recommend, we'll maybe come back to it later, will remember a discussion that we had in there about the fact that inflammation is part of the body's adaptive response to disease, and that it gets away from us for various reasons. And that's when it's pathological. It's not that inflammation is inherently bad. It's part of the immune response. But then it can get away from you, which is where things become serious. But what they say is that you've got...
But they didn't say anything about that so far. You just brought that in again. The thing he just said, it's not there. It's not in this fucking thing that he's reading. if you were to listen to this like on the audio only, it would be unclear like what he's saying and what is in the abstract, right? Because if you just listen to this on Spotify, you wouldn't have this image in front of you.
You would come out less informed on the other side.
Well, even with the image, you're coming out less informed on the other side. Either way, just not even knowing this article exists, you're probably doing better.
Cytokine, you've got these cytotoxic T cells, natural killer cells, both phenotypically resembling cytokine-driven killer cells. So what they're describing is they are peering into the process of so-called vaccine-induced myocarditis, and they are finding the body reacting as if it is fending off an infection in the heart, exactly as I proposed. Mm-hmm. Yep. In addition, patients displaying signatures of inflammatory and profibric CCR2 and CD163 plus monocytes coupled with elevated serum-soluble CD163 that may be linked to late gadolinium enhancement or cardiac MRI. So they're talking about something that they're seeing, they're looking into these hearts with magnetic resonance imaging, and they're seeing pathologies that are grossly evidenced. These are not molecular.
That's not what they said. This doesn't say that. It doesn't say it's not using adjectives like grossly. It's not saying that.
Correct.
Level pathologies, but they're seeing them, which can
a lot of specifics here that are going to be inside baseball, even for us with regard to.
Well, what do you do all day, Heather? What do you do all day? HK, are you with us?
Mm-hmm.
What do they do all
reading.
day?
What does Heather do all day?
What do they do all day?
Fuck if I know. Podcast, I guess.
Is
this their only thing?
If I had all day to look at this abstract.
Oh, well, she spends like 4 or 5 hours in the grocery store thinking about where her apples came from.
What are the indicators that are useful, since by and large you cannot detect damage directly? So what we're seeing here is a lot of proxies for damage measured in a lot of different ways.
A lot of
different proxies, a lot of different measurements.
But they say, so that last sentence, we go back to the beginning of it. In addition, patients displayed signatures of inflammatory and profibric CCR. Profibrotic, which means this is basically scar tissue formation. That's what that means. And so what we're talking about is not, okay, this patient had a transient inflammation of the heart, which went away, and thank goodness they got away with it, and now they can go back to life. The point is they lost capacity in the heart. And this is not proven, but what they're saying is we see a pathology that is consistent with a heart damaged by natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells, in which scarring is the best repair that can be made. Mm-hmm. So that heart is now damaged for life. It now scars in the best case, and this person is now vulnerable to things like arrhythmias. They are less capable than they once were, and
it doesn't say that.
That's not what they said.
This is a potentially life-shortening pathology.
I mean, they're just lying.
So I know we're not done with the abstract yet. You're in the middle here still, but you mentioned, this is therefore not transient. How then have they been getting away with calling the myocarditis and the pericarditis transient in so many cases? In part, and some of this will no doubt be intentional, but much of it will probably be utterly unintentional, because doctors, like everyone in any field, will often conflate the underlying thing with the thing that they are measuring and imagine that they are the same. If what you are measuring is inflammation in its acute phase, that acute inflammation will indeed be transient. And so then you take that conclusion out into the world and say, yes, damage, wow, are bad, but it's over and done with after a while, because we can't see it anymore, can we? So the thing that is being...
But there's just so many different reasons that a person might have mild or even moderate inflammation of their heart or any organ in their body. You ever have like swelling in somewhere on your body? You have no idea where the fuck it came from, and then it just goes away in a day?
Well, I think in this study, they're talking specifically about inflammation caused by The mRNA vaccine?
Maybe. I mean, yes, sure, but they're not, the thing is, they're not saying that it is for sure caused by it. They're saying subsequent to receiving the vaccine. That's different than caused by the vaccine.
Well, it sounds like it is. It is caused by the vaccine. But as noted in the study, it is rare.
Measured isn't.
They're studying like patients that are experiencing a rare condition from the vaccine. And again, I would rather have a little heart tissue being scarred than be fucking dead. Right? Wouldn't you?
Sure, but that's not the only, I mean, COVID doesn't just kill you, but I mean, the other thing that's going on here is that this kind of thing that they're talking about is also an effect that you have from COVID.
I mean, COVID has killed millions of people in the US.
I understand. But what they're describing here is also something that happens from COVID. So you're probably more likely to have this happen from COVID than from the vaccine.
That's true, yeah.
But there was never any reason to conclude, therefore, that the damage that that inflammation was indicating would be transient as well.
Right. So it's a little bit like if you had a building collapse and you detected it by the dust that was kicked up. The dust might clear, but it doesn't put the building back up. Right.
What the fuck?
Anyway, they're using proxies, which is frankly what you just simply
That's a great analogy.
What you have to do with all of this stuff,
right?
Because we're dealing with.
But there's a problem with your analogy here, Brett, because dust could be caused by a building not collapsing. There could just be fucking dust from somewhere else besides a building collapsing. So that's actually your analogy is stupid. Because there could be dust in the air for any other number of reasons besides a building collapsing. So your analogy is stupid.
Inside a living person, and it's difficult to assess.
Right, but I think I just want to point to the media that grabbed onto this. Like, it's transient, it's fine. The "it's fine" thing was their conclusion, based on a misunderstanding.
Here, pause this for a second. I do just want to read from the CDC's website. Quote, "The known risks of COVID-19 illness and its related, possibly severe complications, such as long-term health problems, hospitalization, and even death, far outweigh the potential risks of having a rare adverse reaction to vaccination, including the possible risk of myocarditis or pericarditis." Unquote.
Because of the misunderstanding of the people actually doing the research of what transient is a reference to. Transient is not a reference to the damage. Transient is a reference to the particular thing that was measured as an indicator of the damage. And so whenever you see any of these conclusions being trotted out in the media, you have to wonder, what actually are you talking about? Right? Like transient in this case is true. And people will, go to their graves saying, no, but it's transient. It's like, yes, but the thing that's transient isn't anything worth talking about, actually. That the only reason we're talking about that is because that was what was measurable. And, the map is not the territory at some level.
Remember the Spin Doctors?
The group, the
band.
1990s band?
Had a great album.
Yeah.
The spin doctors were named after a phenomenon that was very real called spin doctors. Spin doctors were people who went, I believe, to presidential debates and maybe other things. And they were there in the room, ready. They were listening to the debate. And if their candidate, the one they had been hired to protect, screwed up, they would immediately lodge in the room of people who were trying to figure out how they were going to report the story. They would lodge the interpretation that minimized the damage or flipped it into a win or whatever. Now, the idea is, okay, how are we going to take the dire fact of these radically novel transfection agents?
Yeah, this again, dire. This is not what's being said here by this. Now they're just like, they may as well not even have the article up anymore. Now they're just fucking spitballing, right? They're just fucking.
Yeah, they're freestyling.
And it doesn't even rhyme, and there's no beat.
Producing heart damage. How
Zach had the good sense to take the fucking thing. They didn't get through the abstract.
Yet the blue team faithful to all, look down their noses at people who are concerned and say, you're obviously a right-wing nut job. Everyone knows the myocarditis is and then transient is going to be the way they're going to spin this very devastating indictment of that technology into something.
That's not what any, that I would take the fucking thing off the screen too, because now it's devastating.
That's not even what the CDC said. The CDC on their, I looked up what the CDC says about this.
I'm more interested. I'm way more interested in what they're saying and how they're presenting it than what the CDC says. I'm just there, especially because this is the last time we're talking about them. I'd really like to kind of stay focused on the way that they manipulate, just the thing that they're presenting, if that's okay.
Yeah, but right now they're misrepresenting the other side. They're saying the other side is always going to say it's just transient, but no, the other side doesn't say that.
Person could work.
So they're arguing against a straw man right now.
All right, so let's just finish this out here. Together, our results demonstrate upregulation of inflammatory cytokines and corresponding lymphocytes with tissue-damaging capabilities, suggesting a cytokine-dependent pathology, which may further be accompanied by myeloid cell-associated cardiac fibrosis. What they're saying is what we see is a reaction consistent with the body damaging its own heart. Why would it do that? Because it's programmed to fend off viruses if they get in there. As bad as heart damage is, an infected heart is worse. So that's what they see is a pattern consistent with that results then in cell-associated cardiac fibrosis. That is to say, scarring, which is the best case. It's bad, but it's the best case. These findings likely
he's also he has a fundamental misunderstanding of how your immune system works. Your immune system isn't sitting there fucking sense making about these things. Right? He's acting like your immune system is conscious and makes decisions. Which is and I'm not an immune system expert, and we're not gonna get into the exact methodology or ways in which your immune system works, but it don't think about things. It's not a thinker. That's why autoimmune diseases are so often deadly, because it takes advantage of the fact that your immune system isn't thinking long term, isn't doing a whole lot of sense making. Your immune system is just always ready to kill you. It is just sitting there, at a sitting on the top of a mountain, and down one way is no more immune system, so you just die of disease. And down the other way is your immune system goes haywire, and best case, you have severe allergies. Worst case, you just die.
Previously proposed mechanisms of mRNA vaccine-associated myopericarditis.
And your body is real good at keeping that immune system right at the top. At least most people. Some people's body is not that great at that.
That means is the Offutt mechanism that he proposed last week, I don't know if he proposed it before that, is not consistent with the findings that they made. And what is consistent, they say that this is a new proposal or a new set of observations, but the point is you ought to notice that new set of observations is consistent with a hypothesis that we put together on camera.
But so there's a couple problems here. One, a new set of observations means that there's been no replication. And these are the very people who have in the past complained about the replication crisis. It was in the social sciences. They've complained about the replication crisis. Well, they are the replication crisis because there's no replication. You know what I'm saying? They're oh, this is a new thing. Well, if it's a new thing, then maybe fucking wait and see, because you don't know, somebody else out there might find this interesting and do a similar study and get slightly different results. Maybe it tends to verify some of what's here, and it tends to go against some of what's here, and then somebody else does another study. Now, I'm not a science genius, but I do know that that's how this all is supposed to work. What these people do is they take one study, oftentimes a new one, misrepresent it, and then act like that not only that the new study is a fucking theory or a scientific law, but that their interpretation of it that they've done fucked up anyway is a vindication of some fucking off-the-cuff bullshit he said on their fucking podcast a year and a half ago. They do this all the time. This is their MO.
Yep. And even further than that, this study is, it was a study with 23 patients.
Oh, fuck.
and 6 of them had to be ruled out because they caught COVID.
So this is a study.
It's a study of 17 patients.
So again, this is like a place where maybe someone else might pick this up and run, right? With a bigger study, but maybe not, because they're like 17. They're like, I'm not going to go after that. I'm not going to chase that ghost in the night. Like, right. This is chasing ghosts in the night. If you're going after, if you're like, this is like why didn't they tell you the sample size? And what the fuck is up with this journal, like, publishing this if it's 17?
Well, it's like, it's fine. They say the sample size in the results paragraph.
Yeah, but we're not going to get there. But Bret doesn't.
No, we're not. But like, this study may have been perfectly fine, and it may demonstrate that there is, risk of myocarditis
at that sample size. I think it might demonstrate that there could be.
Well, I mean, the CDC says there is. There is a risk of developing myocarditis after the vaccine. But it's such a small risk that the risk of not having the vaccine is so much higher. So much higher. I mean, it's kind of like insurance, right? If your insurance costs like $5 a month to insure everything in your house, you're going to take that because that's a good risk reward assessment. But if your insurance, like, that's like getting the vaccine, and then not getting the vaccine is like, well, your insurance may cost $0, but it doesn't cover anything in your house.
So,
because you just don't have insurance.
You would think maybe they should put the sample size in the fucking abstract.
I mean, I don't really have a problem with the study.
Well, I have
I'm
a problem with
neither of us are presenting the study.
Are either of us even in a position to peer review this study?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't really
Well,
matter.
the study
It doesn't
seems
really
fine.
matter. It
It's
doesn't
just-
really matter if you or I have a problem with this study.
I have a problem with their interpretation of this study
On Dark Horse.
and how they're presenting it.
I say my hypothesis. I do not mean this is my hypothesis alone. And in fact, I went back to the original.
This is important, where you're about to go.
Was that a
And this
sneeze?
takes us
I don't know, but this is important.
far from this paper. Can I just share a couple of excerpts from the end of the paper first? Because we're probably not going to come right back to this paper. The very end of the discussion of the paper. On the basis of our findings, longitudinal clinical monitoring of vaccine-associated myopericarditis patients may be warranted to assess potential persistence of cardiac.
There's a lot of hedging in that single sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, potential, based on the basis
Longitudinal clinical monitoring of vaccine-associated myopericarditis patients may be warranted to assess potential persistence of cardiac abnormalities. In other words, if you got myocarditis after getting the vaccine, someone should probably keep an eye on that for you.
Abnormalities.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Then in the same paragraph.
Yeah, and may be warranted is.
Then in the same paragraph, future studies building on the translational relevance of our work will be important to further optimize the excellent safety profile of mRNA vaccines among specific demographic subgroups.
Amen.
Amen. Right. Now, they do, specific demographic subgroups.
Yeah, it sounds like they completely disagree with you two.
And
they do this. They're doing this thing that, on one hand, they're like, "Oh, look, this scientific paper says that I'm right," but then on the other hand, they're like, "Oh, fuck these scientific papers."
Yeah. Don't pay attention to where it says I'm wrong.
or just don't pay attention to the part where they're hedging, is what they're saying, right? They're like, this hedging is something they have to do because of their religion, because he keeps saying amen, amen, amen. And so,
but I mean, this part, like, just patently goes against everything that they've said.
or at least it
Like they're saying mRNA vaccines are safe.
right. Or
They have an excellent safety profile.
and the hedging part does the hedging that these two will never do.
Yep.
You ever ever hear anybody who really actually knows what the fuck they're talking about? As soon as they get just a little bit away from the thing that they're a fucking expert in, they start hedging and being, oh, somebody, if they're giving a speech to like an audience at a university or something, they might be like, oh, somebody at this audience might know more about this than I do. Oh, I'm sure that there's somebody here who is gonna tear me apart for this, but here's my understanding. Like, you know what I'm saying? And you never hear any of this shit from these two people. None of it.
Mm-hmm.
It will be required soon to reflect back and say, yes, maybe we shouldn't have been vaccinating the young men after all. Are bad, right? Like that is becoming the thing that is now not only acceptable, but necessary. And this specific demographic subgroups is the nod to that future orthodoxy. But will we ever get to a legitimate orthodoxy in which there is widespread understanding that, as you are saying, and this is where I'm going to just hand it right back to you, actually, these were not ready. These were not ready. They couldn't have possibly been ready. This platform is not ready.
They very clearly were ready. They had a significant impact on the danger of COVID-19.
And again, they
saved lives.
Again, what I'm going to focus on here, because it's what I'm capable of assessing, is that they still have this sciencey looking paper up. They're not talking about it, and they're just making like wild, like declarative claims.
Yep.
No one should.
They're pretending that like the scientists in this paper completely agree with them too. That's the weirdest part to me, is like they just pretend that like, every scientist agrees with them. They just can't say it because they're under all this pressure from, some nefarious group, some them out there.
We're near ready.
Right.
But, I mean, look, I don't want to say anything negative about these authors. My guess is these authors faced a problem. They did good work. It successfully advances the ball in terms of how much we know. This now goes out of the realm of hypothesis. We now have a mechanism that appears is now the presumptive mechanism, right? We know what it is, and we now know what it implies. And frankly, that's hugely important. But the fact that they have to riddle this piece of excellent work with, various incantations designed to placate various powerful gods is absurd. And
this is
last one,
powerful gods. They're placating powerful
It wouldn't
gods.
have gotten published in Science Immunology, but
They're like, this is just how this stuff always reads, right? There's always a lot of maybe, could be, possibly, according to our research, what we believe to have been found, more research is needed. That's just how this shit always reads.
You want to hear a really nice nugget from the second paragraph of the introduction?
Sure.
Given the difficulties associated with studying such rare cases, the etiology of vaccine-associated myopericarditis remains largely unknown.
for those nods to the orthodoxy.
right? And the orthodoxy is, I don't like the term.
I mean, that kind of explains why their sample size was only 17. It's like there just aren't a lot of people that this has happened to.
I think they're on like a different paper publication now, but
They're still
I'm not
talking
sure
about this one.
But I'm not sure.
Take a radical, dangerous technology like this, and you're going to claim that it's only really bad for certain demographics. Young, healthy men? Like, that's not a certain demographic. And what's more,
Well, yes, it is.
we talked about either last week or the week before.
Is literally a
found
certain
135, vaccinated people.
What else
had
would you
elevated
call that?
troponin levels. It was actually women who were more commonly showing this sign. So, hey, we don't know how extensive the damage is, and these aren't limited subgroups. Healthy young men is that a demographic that half the population is supposed to pass through?
That's not half the population. Half the population are not healthy young men. You stupid fuck. You absolute stupid motherfucker. Half the population are men. You start adding variables.
I think he meant at one point half the population is a healthy young man, which is still wrong.
Right, because not everybody's healthy.
Yeah, and not everyone makes it to young man.
That's, you can talk
To be
about.
fair, if you're dead, you're not part of the population, HK.
You were as a kid.
Demographic groups and know that there are some, who they are intending to keep in the line of fire for these and future mRNA vaccines is older and immune compromised people and people who otherwise have comorbidities that put them at particular risk for whatever the pathogen is that we're talking about.
No, I'm sorry, I'm pushing back, because the very sentence, I think it was the same sentence, they say optimize the excellent safety profile.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What in God's name does that mean? These things.
I mean, that's why I read it.
That means getting better at getting better. That's all it means.
Yeah, I think literally it's like they worded that in a particular way because I feel like these scientists who study this particular thing kind of know that their words will get twisted.
Yeah, you think
so? That's why I
out?
imagine they worded it that way.
Yeah, you think they figured it out by this point? You'd have to be dumb to not.
What?
To not figure it out. You'd have to be dumb to not figure out that you should be very precise, lest you be misrepresented by people like Bret and Heather.
Yep.
But they'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I think these scientists are pretty aware that, there is a large, not that large, but there's a significant percentage of the population that just loves to twist their words. And if they say anything, like if you give them an inch, they will take a mile.
But I don't think specific demographic subgroups is a legitimate way to understand populations. We know we were talking about, as were some other people, the need to risk stratify both our understanding of COVID and our understanding of the mRNA vaccines as they were being trotted out. And almost no one was doing it. And that was part of why you got, parents living, scared parents living in scared fear until they could get their tiny children vaccinated with so-called vaccines that were much
so-called vaccines? What?
Of doing damage to their children than the virus.
Now I want to go to a dinner party with these two.
Risk stratification.
Does she not even agree that they're vaccines now?
Yes.
Massively important thing to be talking about. And
risk stratification is great, but when you have a novel technology that is a threat to a huge fraction of the population, and then you minimize it by talking about demographic groups, instead of saying, actually, we don't know how big a threat this is, and we don't know if we're noticing it in young, healthy people because it gets obscured by the pathologies that older, unhealthy people tend to have anyway. So the point is this. They're just way ahead of what we understand, and they're using language to minimize it, and that's not cool. That said, again, the authors did excellent work, and they got it into a high-profile, top-tier publication, and these are compromises they may have had to do, and I don't judge them for that. Okay.
That's a good enough place to stop. I think they're going to move on to the next subject.
He just thinks that everyone agrees with him, they just can't say it.
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and finish this because if we're gonna bid them a fond farewell, we should certainly watch some of this while I'm drinking vodka, right? Like, because in many ways we built this channel on me drinking vodka and watching these two people lie. So.
Yep. Can I say though, we're not really bidding them a fond farewell. We're more bidding them a forceful fuck off.
A forceful fuck off. Yeah, and if they end up doing something monumentally stupid, or if they have like Sam Harris on and there's like a bust up, we will cover that. But otherwise, we're gonna mostly leave this alone because we've been covering these people a lot. So vodka. Somebody said from chat, vodka from the vodka tree. Nobody thought about how the vodka got there.
No, vodka comes from the vodka root.
I usually drink grain vodka, but
okay. The vodka. What is that? A bush? No, it's
vodka grain. We're not going to do this. Listen, this is. I'm going to read this show out this week actually because I never read this show out. This has been the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show live every Wednesday on Twitch at twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. Make sure you tune in next week because we will be adding to the cast of characters. If you listen to this whole podcast, just remember the rest of it's available on Patreon for free, patreon.com/Echoplex. You can get the whole thing. I might even DJ later. That'll also be up on the patrons feed. And after you get the free one at Patreon, consider becoming a member or go over to eplex.store and become a member there. You get the same benefits that you would on Patreon, but you get to do it through Fourth Wall, and our split's a little bit better, and you get a discount on our swag. Also, pick up some swag at eplex.store. And now I am vamping because I forgot to load up our the song we play when we end this show, which is Boomers by Periscope. I'm going to change the contents of my drink, change the color of the lights in this room, and try to figure out why the lights behind me are flickering a little bit. We'll be back with Red Light.